designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate.
Hello, podcast listeners, and thank you for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate podcast. As you may have already noticed, you're not hearing the voice of our normal host, Kyle Malnati, as he is out of appointments dealing with real estate business, as to be expected. Instead, this week, I will be doing our introduction. My name is Kayla Davis, and I am the producer of the Calibrate Real Estate podcast. On this episode, we're going to be featuring Amy Campbell and Kyle Malnati for part 2 of our real estate conference planning episode. Part 1 is going to be linked down below. If you missed that episode last week, go ahead and click that link to tune in and get all the key points. Part 1 covered all the steps you're going to be needing to think about when you're creating your plan for hosting an event, whereas this week, episode 26, is going to be part 2, featuring how to recruit for that plan and really implement that plan for success. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump right in, and thank you so much for tuning in.
So we're sharing this out a lot. Now, when tickets are purchased, our next step is we're sending out a survey for them to complete. What we wanted to do is we wanted to figure out, okay, how are we going to create our event materials? And we asked a few questions so that people could kind of be a part of that event material creation. So that was very helpful. We also used it to introduce the administrative staff for any support while people were coming into town if they needed any special accommodations. And we're not talking about a bowl of blue M&Ms at their hotel or something, but
I'm talking about Mariah Carey.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, you want to have someone that's in the host city helping out if you've got people that are from out of state. We did a survey through SurveyMonkey that was really cool. And that survey, I think, really helped us for future events is the other point of it. And you can ask whatever questions you want, but things like, did you like the event? Did you like the speakers? Which speakers did you feel like shouldn't be speaking next time?
We did 2 surveys. I think the one reference here is the initial survey before the event.
Right.
We asked people, what were their pain points? What are they good at?
That's a good point.
And Kayla developed name tags for everybody. And on the name tag, it had what your pain point is and what your strength is. So it could fuel conversations. Or if I'm talking to you and I maybe don't know you too well, I can look at your name tag and say, oh, wow, your strength is hiring. I'm struggling through that right now. Can we talk? And so I think that was the intent of the initial survey, but then absolutely do a post-event follow-up survey to get feedback so you can tailor the event if you're doing it again the following year. But also the pre-event survey is great for finding out what people want to learn. What do they want to hear? What do they want out of the event? Because if you can tailor the event to the people that are going to be there, and that's kind of rule number 1 for having a great event and having everyone walk away feeling like they really got a lot out of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I'm so glad that you captured that point because I almost missed it. The pre-survey is so important for creating that content around the event, so much so that I actually changed my speech because there were so many people that were struggling with hiring. And it's not that I've got hiring figured out, but it's something I've kind of gone through this exhaustive journey of figuring out what works and what doesn't work in hiring. And so I chose to make my speech based on that. But the other part of it too is just, we had some feedback from prior events that, gosh, it happened organically. We found the person that we felt like we needed to find at the event, but it would be really nice to know, like, as you're talking to someone and looking at their name tag, this is what their pain point is, because you might be an industry expert at that thing, or you might have connectivity on, I'm struggling with that too. And it really creates community around the event. So that was, I'm so glad you mentioned it because I almost missed it, but that was something that Kayla had put together in one of these conference calls that we had some feedback about. We want people to be willing to share what their pain point is and then what their success is, so that there could be kind of this organic matching at some of our break points in the event, some of these just breakout periods.
Exactly.
So catering. I'm a big believer in people have so much fun when they're not hungry. We don't want anybody to get hangry.
I get hangry.
My wife Courtney gets hangry too. I think all of us get hangry. But you know, that's something that really can make an event win or lose. If you don't have good food, and if the food's not hot, and that was the thing for me, is I didn't want a continental breakfast. I wanted people to come and experience something that was uniquely Colorado, something that was kind of distinctive to our state. So we had some local flair to the catering menu, but it was also not crazy expensive. in relative terms, your catering budget, by the way, is going to be about 10, maybe 20% of what you spend.
And your catering and your venue are the largest chunks. I mean, then you also have AV.
Sure.
Right? But catering, people often don't realize it's very expensive. Like I said before, if you've ever planned a wedding,
Yeah.
you look at price per head number, you're like, whoa, this adds up quickly.
Yep.
And to your point, food is a huge determinant in whether people enjoy an event or not, any event. And especially if it's an all-day event, if you're just serving one meal, then you can I think maybe you can get away with not doing something as special. But if we're feeding people multiple meals throughout the day and we're asking them to be in one room from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m., food is going to be a big driver of happiness, right?
Yes.
And enjoyment.
Absolutely. I feel like it is one of those things that when done badly, everybody recognizes it. When done well, maybe not everyone's going to comment on it, but it makes the difference in an event, especially an all-day event. Like you said, if it's something that's a few hours, maybe you can get by with some less of that, but this is hospitality, you know, and some people may think of it as Southern hospitality, but anytime you're planning an event, whether it's at your house or it's a big wedding or an event for an industry, that's going to be a big component of what's going to bring people together. Is people tend to break bread. They have community around food, and that makes the event a lot of fun. So the caterer was a big deal. We won't get into all the details of this. We will actually put some of this content out on our website so you can use it and pick best practices. So we talked about the happy hour. That was step number 9. We mentioned that earlier, but that was a big deal for us. Now, we opted not to do it at a hotel. We decided, you know, Colorado is really well known for its breweries. It's known for other things too, but Colorado craft breweries are a big deal. And so we decided to host it at one of my good friends' breweries, Black Shirt Brewing Company. Chad Miller is a buddy of mine. He was a real estate agent before he got into the brewing industry. I felt like that was, now there needs to be food there too. If you're going to have adult beverages, we don't want people, you know, going on an empty stomach right from the airport and starting to drink some potent beer at altitude. All of a sudden,
that's the key, at altitude. Even if it's not potent beer, it'll still get you.
Yeah, exactly. Those that are at sea level, all of a sudden, you know, the altitude will get you. So, so I think that what we wanted to do is we wanted this to have a real authentic feel, real authentic Colorado feel. And I think that's probably the main takeaway from, if you do a happy hour or do anything with your event that is going to be outside of just paperwork and notebooks and things of that sort, you want it to feel authentic.
Well, and if you have people traveling in from a different state,
right,
or we had people from all over the country. We had someone from Hawaii who joined us. And I think there's people that this was their first time in Colorado. So to your point with the food that we chose for our event, as well as our happy hour, we wanted something that was a little bit of a taste of Denver or a taste of Colorado, and not just a generic. We originally planned the happy hour at kind of a generic tavern restaurant,
like a bar and grill.
Yeah, which was fine.
And it was a local,
fine. It was locally owned, but it wasn't. And I think it was because of the part of town it was in. It was more of just kind of a generic area that wasn't downtown, and didn't have as much exciting things going on around it, that we decided, you know what, we need to move this. And we actually moved it to a brewery, luckily that you knew the owner. Yeah. So that helped. But it was in a fun, really up and coming area of, close to downtown Denver, and pizza and beer. What's more Colorado? Everybody loves pizza. Pretty much everybody loves beer, but if you don't, we had other things, non-alcoholic beverages. And I think you're right. It's really important when you have out-of-town guests that they've got that hospitable feel and that local authentic vibe. And when we first started with the other venue, it was kind of flat, like the interest level, you could just tell it. I was like, we both talked about this. And this was something that you raised your hand and said you were going to really work on the happy hour, which was a huge undertaking. And when we were feeling like we weren't getting that type of interest and enthusiasm that we had hoped for, we decided to pivot. And I think it was a good move. And that was something we decided together. Right. So that was good. We couldn't have predicted the wind that day, but oh my gosh. Yeah. We made a good decision in moving. Yeah. Something that's not on this list is just weather. I mean, people flying in one of the craziest windstorms. Colorado has a unique topography, and a lot of people know about our Rocky Mountains. One of the big attractions to having the event here is there's a bunch of people who've never been to Colorado before.
for. And so that's a really cool thing too. And you want to show them the time of their lives that they're only here for a few days. We had one of our speakers go up to the mountains to go skiing. And then they were trying to make it to the Avalanche game the next day. You don't want skiing avalanches, but our Colorado hockey team is called the Avalanche. And so he was really embracing the authentic Colorado culture.
Yeah.
But yeah, the weather is just one of those things that you're just going to have to kind of deal with. And there were unfortunately several of my good buddies that didn't make it because of weather-related concerns. And sometimes that's just going to happen. Okay, drama time. Speakers were the hardest part from my perspective of the
I agree.
event.
It's the hardest part of planning an event is going to be the content, the who, and then what are they going to, and when do they commit?
Yes. So one of the reflections that I have is that this was a pure volunteer event. We donated our time, both you and I donated staff. Kayla was administering, that wasn't really her primary job, although she's very good at it. She was adminning the event. All of the speakers that were here are talented in their own right, and several of them, including myself, are paid speakers, but they all, because of the kind of this interesting group that we have, this powerful alumni group, that chose to be willing to speak for no fee. Right. One of our speakers, Rogers Healy, who was 2 episodes ago on the podcast as we record this today, he was coming from a Fox News interview in Dallas that morning. I mean, so he's like a big time speaker. Jimmy Mackin, who was the most recent podcast episode that we just launched on the day that we're recording this, Jimmy Mackin is a paid professional speaker. So speakers are really, really kind of this interesting breed of people, right? Because they're very busy. Rogers definitely admits this. I'll admit this myself. We are overcommitted. Because we really love the ability to have a platform and to communicate. We overcommit ourselves. So I'll talk about some of my reflections as a speaker, but then also the arranger of speakers. But what were some of the things that you thought about being the MC with kind of corralling the speakers, if you will?
Well, I know from hearing kind of your story of you were the organizer of contacting them and getting them to commit and finding a topic for them to present on. I think one of the first things you have to decide is, okay, there's different types of presentation. So not only who do we want to have, but what do we want to have? You have a keynote speaker that's an individual giving a presentation on a particular topic. You can have an interview, which we did a few of, where you have kind of one person or a host, if you will, interviewing a presenter on a certain topic, and then a panel. We did one panel. So you have a moderator with a panel of several people talking about a particular topic. So I think it's good to have a mixture of different types of presentations. But I think one of the biggest challenges I saw from an outsider looking in, from you trying to corral is like herding cats, right? Is speakers like
hitting jello to a tree.
Right? They're naturally very successful, right? Because if we want to hear what they have to say, they're clearly successful in something.
Yeah.
They are usually overcommitted with speaking engagements, and they're just busy. And so to get them to commit to the event is the first thing, and to get them to commit to a topic is another thing. Okay, what do you want to tell us about? And then, do you have slides? And are you going to send those to us ever? And I think for us, there were, up until like a few days before the morning of the event, we were still unsure on some of the speakers and their topics. So I think it's 2-part when planning is, okay, not only who, but then what type of presentation, and then what are they talking about?
Yeah, and Rogers Healy self-admitted this on stage in front of everybody. He's like, kudos to Kyle and his team. They're well organized. I'm jealous of it. Hosting an event like this takes a lot of logistical pieces and a lot of follow-up. And he's like, I'm just really jealous of that. They've been asking me for weeks for my presentation, and I wrote it on the plane as I was heading here. And he goes, like everybody laughed because it's going to still be good. And he was one of the best speakers. I mean, he brought down the house. He's a natural speaker, and trained also as a speaker. But you have that where it's just like, okay, I hope it works out.
Luckily in that situation though, sorry to cut you off, but luckily in that situation, we had both heard Roger speak before. So we were confident in his ability because we had seen him on stage before. If you have someone planned that you've never seen on stage before and you maybe aren't as confident in what they can do, then that can be a much more frightening situation if they are really, lagging behind in getting you their presentation.
You're exactly right. And that was really the genesis of asking these speakers, every single one of them. And one of our speakers asked me this. He's like, have you seen this person present? And in each case, I've said yes, because I have seen them present. And some are going to be better than others. Some have more difficult topics to talk about than others do. And I think that as you're planning an event, you just did a wonderful job of breaking down the types of presentations. The keynote speech is the hardest thing to do because it's typically one person to an audience. There might be slides, but there might not. And their job is to really capture the awe and to inspire an audience and to connect with them. And that's very difficult to do in a group, to be a skilled orator.
Right. You have to be experienced in doing that.
Right. And you've got to have a real defined purpose for your presentation. Got to cut some jokes. You've got to do some, audience participation at times. So that's kind of the hardest. The second is you've got someone who's very skilled at what they do, but maybe doesn't feel as comfortable standing on their own as that one-on-one interview. That still can go badly because you're still very focused in the podcast that I do is a lot of that topic where I'm the interviewer. And it's actually, there's a lot of people like, man, podcasting, that'd be so hard. Like, actually, I sit here and just ask questions, and I ask questions that I think that people would want to know the answers to. And that's, in my opinion, what creates a good interviewer, someone who's wanting to learn alongside the audience. And so the interview is more focused on that person who's answering the questions. And one of the successes that I found with the podcast, as well as with interviewing on stage, is the guest has got to have those questions in advance. You can surprise them with a couple of little things here and there that are maybe more kind of ad lib this answer, but by and large, they want to know kind of what the script is going to be.
Absolutely. That's so important for really any type of public interview, or if you're in front of people answering questions, because you want their answers to be well thought out. That's what's going to give value to the people who are listening. And sometimes when people are put on the spot, they may give an answer, but it might not be the best answer they could have given. And afterwards, I think we've all been in that situation where afterwards you're like, oh man, I should have said that. Why didn't I think of that at the time? And you don't want to do that to someone who you're interviewing. You want them to be prepared.
Yes, absolutely. And then maybe the easiest, not that it's easy, but the easiest then is the third, which is the panel. And that's basically an interview with multiple people.
Yep.
So each person is not as much on the hot seat as that one-on-one interview, that fireside chat that we had with a couple of people. But this is kind of a cautionary beware. You can have too many people on a panel.
Yes.
And you can have someone dominate the panel and others not really get to share. So there's a couple things that we had to do to really be prepared for it. We did the working mom panel, which Amanda did an amazing job moderating. She had several conference calls with the people on the panel. And then we also did some video chats in addition to an actual phone call, so that people could kind of feel like they got to see each other before the event. And we all felt, I was on the panel myself, I wasn't, but we all felt like we knew each other from being on that video chat. And then one of the things that I did to really help Amanda was, and not everyone's going to be able to do this, is I interviewed each one of the individual panelists as content for the podcast, so that Amanda could then listen to it and basically fill in the gaps of what maybe I didn't ask them, or if I didn't dive deep enough, she could dive deep with them on stage. And that was a lot of fun for her to have someone else ask questions, and kind of we would fed off of each other. So that was a really fun outcome of being able to plan for that panel. The thing that I suggest with a panel is that you don't have lav mics, that you have pass the mic, and that you don't have everybody having a mic, because basically it's like a talking stick. It's like pass the baton, and you don't get people talking over each other.
Yeah.
So that worked for us.
Yeah. And panels, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with panels. I've seen a lot of them at different real estate conferences. And to your point, you can have too many panelists. I think really 3 plus a moderator is probably the sweet spot, because the moderator is going to add to the conversation as well. So you really have 4 people telling their story. And the more people you have, the more likely it is that the same thing is going to be repeated. And then it's like, okay, this is a waste of time, because it just goes down. Everyone's like, oh, well, me too. I agree with what she said.
Right.
And I think our panelists did a great job that day they all had different stories and tips to share. But if you have too many people, it gets kind of diluted. And sometimes I've seen panels go horribly wrong, where it's just about, every person's just about me. I just want to tell about who I am and what I've done. And they kind of try to one up each other.
Right. I have seen that before too. And it's awkward.
It is. And it's not really valuable to anybody.
Right. Yeah. So there needs to be some sort of connection.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I've seen panels that are put together and they're sort of like thrown together with we did the working moms panel, and there was some controversy around that because not everyone's a mom, because there's a bunch of dads in the room. Now the dads may be able to relate to maybe their spouse if they have kids, but there's a lot of people who don't have kids, who have no desire to have kids. And Amanda did a very artful job of saying, like, here's your opportunity to opt into the conversation and not be silently skeptical. But there are going to be some people who are kind of like, why do they get to be up on stage? I know that also. And so I think that you can have the panelists compete with each other, which is awkward, but you can also have a situation where there's not that connectivity. There's not a theme around that panel. And it just seems like there's not any purpose behind it. And so I think that would be the key with a panel, is make sure you get people who have lots of time together rehearsing beforehand, and then that they also have some sort of connection with each other. Last couple of things, and then we'll wrap up our show. Event materials. We could have a whole show about event materials. That was a big, important part of it. Kayla was doing a lot of that. Any best practices or any kind of observations on our event materials? You have our book in front of you.
Show it.
And so we had a notebook, we had name tags, we had lots of different things that we used.
What I liked about this, I think this was one of the best event materials of really any event that I've been to. I like that it's full size. Some people may disagree, but sometimes you go to the event and they give you a notebook, but it's small. And I like when I write notes, like I just like a full page to write on. But I like that it's bound, like it's with the spiral binding. It just makes it easier, makes it durable.
Yep.
There are pages in here, just blank pages with no lines. And apparently that's way cheaper than adding lines to the page. But also sometimes you have to draw diagrams, or I don't know, just the way I take notes, I found it helpful that there weren't lines. So they're just blank pages. But when you have your notes from an event like this, when it's bound in a way that is durable, I know that I can keep this for a long time. It's just my bookshelf. I carry it around in my bag and it won't fall apart.
Yep.
So I thought this was great. Kayla did a great job. And it had the schedule. I think that's big. Having a schedule for people to know what to expect throughout the day is really big. And to kind of figure out, okay, I need to take a break. Is there one coming up? I don't want to miss a speaker. And so to have everything laid out so people know exactly how the day is going to go, I think is really helpful.
Yeah, the event book is probably the best event material to talk about. I think that most people look at that as their roadmap. If you've gone to any event that is worth its weight in gold, one of those events that you feel like, gosh, the ticket price, like I feel like I should have paid more because the event was so good. A lot of times it has to do with a well-organized book. Kayla was like, much to her chagrin, the agenda got shuffled around, and as agendas do, and that high C personality, that very clerical, very orderly, very conscientious personality doesn't want the agenda to change, but it's going to change at times. So you've got to just roll with the punches at times. But yeah, the event materials, I think if you get a good solid book that's got a great agenda, that people can expect what's going to be happening, so there's not big surprises. You want to wow your audience with some surprises, but give them a general idea of when they're going to eat, when there's going to be break time, which speakers are coming up. Lots and lots of extra pages. We put far more pages in there than were necessary, but we wanted people to continue to use these. I still use some of these event materials just as a notebook for other things. And it's pretty special to have that level of detail. It takes a lot of work. We asked a lot of feedback, and the event I think really was great because of that manual that we used, that book that we used.
I agree. And they're relatively affordable. I think she said for 90 books, the cost was just under $800.
Yeah.
So to me, that's money well spent.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, it was very, the way I'm thinking about this is the cost of the event overall. It was a $20,000 event, all said. And that's a pretty small portion of your event budget.
Right.
Okay, last couple things, a full list of vendors. We had AV people, both the audio of it, people hearing you on microphones so that everybody could hear around the room. But we also had videographers, and we'll talk about that briefly. Those of you that have been subscribers to the podcast, you know the last handful of episodes we have been reused content from the event. So that was one of the reasons I really wanted to have the AV there, is I wanted this event to live long past the actual day of, because there's people who couldn't make it that wanted to hear it, or people that heard it, but you hear it differently that second time, right?
There's a lot of presentations that I want to, once they're all posted, go back and listen to a second time. Because yes, I have my notes, but some of my notes, like, I was writing fast. Like, what did I mean by that? And it goes so fast, and you can't write as fast as someone speaking. So I think to listen to it again, it's either going to help you retain what you learn, or it's going to help you pick up things you didn't hold on to the first time.
Absolutely. We had, again, that AV part of it, but also technology. One of the things that I think was kind of I'll admit is a failure, is that we didn't think about Wi-Fi. And it's funny because we're so focused on the event, and you bring a bunch of realtors who have contracts going on and have other stuff going on outside of that event. Every single person's like, what's the Wi-Fi code? And we're talking to the event space, just assuming that they had this beefed up, bolstered Wi-Fi for 100 people. And they're like, oh yeah, we have a pretty weak Wi-Fi signal. It's really just for our own office use. And so everyone's like pulling their hair out. One person asked me, can I go to a Starbucks nearby? Like, that was a big deal for people that were trying to do business while they were still at the event. Now, you hope that people can kind of disconnect, but the reality of our world is people want to be able to be in an event and check an email and do different stuff. And so the Wi-Fi piece of it was something that we probably should have gotten an outside vendor. We talked about catering. We talked about the happy hour that we did. We used Canva for designing some of these templates. We used Avery for our name tags. Avery is a big printing company that you can just order stuff online and print it on your printer. We used 800 CEO Read for wholesale books. We had given a lot of the people the ideal team player. There it is. So my presentation about hiring really went into that book, The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. And so we used that vendor to get books for everybody at a discounted rate. We used Logo On, which is a local company here in Colorado, to do our event program. We also use them for Calibrate jackets and Calibrate polos. And so having a great logo company or a great directory that you can use for event materials, I think is a big deal. So then finally, step 14 of this whole process, after the event is complete, you must do an autopsy or an after action review. This recording is kind of an after action review in and of itself. And I've talked about this a lot of times on the podcast, but the military uses this term after action review, which basically is an autopsy of every mission. And it doesn't have to be a death. I'm not trying to make it morbid, but they're basically saying, hey, okay, there's 5 things that we need to cover. Okay, what was the plan? You have to have a plan beforehand, but every time you have a plan, something's inevitably going to go wrong. So what was the plan? Step number 2 is what actually happened. Step number 3 is, what went well? And then step number 4 is what went wrong. So you could interchange those, what went wrong, what went well, and then what can we do to improve performance the next time around? So we're kind of all roads in that after action review are leading towards what can we do better next time, but then also what are these lessons that are embedded in successes and failures? Because sometimes there's good lessons in success. You want to amplify those things, but the things that aren't working really well, you want to fix those for the next time. So that after action review is really important. Any last thoughts or after action review on this, Amy, as the MC of our event? anything that you'd like to see next time or at the next event you do?
I was going to say Wi-Fi was a big learning piece for us.
Yes.
I mean, overall, I think our group did a great job planning. I think the biggest piece of the puzzle is finding the right person or people to have the reins and to handle all the details. Hopefully, I mean, the point of us doing this is to shed some light for someone who wants to do a similar event. So you can hopefully avoid making some mistakes and think of some details that maybe you wouldn't have without listening to this first. But it's thinking about, and this is true, I think, for any event planning, but thinking about what you would like. If you were just a participant, how would you like the day to go? And what would you expect? And then plan it to what would you want to go to? Or what kind of event would you want to go to? What type of food would you want to eat? And for us, I think our biggest struggle and thing to change for next year is scheduling. Mm-hmm. So figuring out a better balance of social time versus presentation time. And our schedule is so jam-packed, and we ran overtime, and so then the end of the day got kind of smushed together. You were the presenter that suffered, so we're sorry for that.
Well, the host is always last, so that's okay. But I wasn't planning to be the last speaker, but we had some travel concerns with other people, and we're running long. We had a little snafu with some slides on some person that was bringing them in.
And then that break in the middle that I referenced earlier, where the energy in the room was deflated. So we said, it's sunny outside. Everyone get up, go outside, stand in the sun. I mean, that was difficult then to get everyone back in a timely manner. It's like 5 minutes, and it really ended up being more of a 15-minute break. So it was, even if you just have 2-minute delays throughout the day, those are going to add up into a big delay at the end, which we experienced. So building in more time for those mistakes to happen, or for those, kind of
expecting some of this stuff to go haywire. Yeah,
it will. It always will. There's no perfect event, and just time for people to kind of decompress. Because even and I probably wouldn't do a lunch speaker next year. So we shoved in a speaker while people were eating, which I think is a little awkward for both the people eating and the presenter, because people are milling around, it's noisy, not everyone's fully paying attention.
Right.
And so that's kind of a difficult thing to do. And I think it's a good time for people to socialize and talk about how the morning went.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on all of your feedback. And I've used this quote often in presentations, especially when talking about the after action review, and it's from someone who's a much maligned person in American history, but Mike Tyson famously would say, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And so what happens is, how are you going to roll with those punches? Mm-hmm. How are you going to adjust and adapt and pivot on things that maybe don't work out your way? And that's what Calibrate's all about, is realizing, like, this is what we want to do, but then recognizing after you have that plan of, this is what's happened, okay, now we need to make this adjustment. And that's what all about calibration is, making adjustments. So I think you bring up a great point. My reflection would be that everybody plays their role and their part. We need to have different personalities to make an event like this successful. It doesn't just take your entertainers. You've got to have your planners. You've got to have people who are making sure that, and you said this, how is the person sitting in the audience going to feel? That empathy, that person that's got that kind of soft, tender-hearted, like, I want to make sure everybody else feels good. You've got to have your drivers, those demonstrative people who are going to just make things happen. You've got to have organized people that are making sure that the trains run on time. And so everybody plays their part. So I think that that's important, just to realize that it really takes a big group of people to make something like this happen.
It does, even just as a one-day event, right? With a happy hour the night before. And there's a lot of work and months of planning that go into it. So hopefully this was helpful to someone who is looking to do the same.
Yeah, for sure. Brad Allen, I'm sure, is going to listen to this.
Yeah, Brad.
And anybody else that would be doing an event like this, I think this is good information just to be thinking about. So we used our event. We were vulnerable in sharing some things that did and didn't go well. But I would say by and large, it went well. It was very successful. I plan to do more events like this. I've done events in the past. Your time with Keller Williams, both in Milwaukee and here in Denver, you've been a part of a lot of events, both local and national. And I think it's important to think through these things. So we hope that this is something you listen to over and over again. If you're a subscriber of the podcast on iTunes, we just want to say thank you. If you subscribe but haven't reviewed it yet, those reviews give life to the people who are producing this podcast, as well as the guests that are a part of it. So please do. And we'd love a 5-star review, but review it either with just, hitting the 5th star or actually putting a little bit of a note in there. And then anybody who's watching on YouTube, if you can subscribe on that channel, that would be greatly appreciated. Well, Amy, I appreciate your time. Both with the event planning, but then also just your time today, spending time with me. Amy Campbell is a 30 under 30 honoree from 2015. So she is one of the younger 30 under 30s and is a big personality within our industry, has got a lot of people that I think are watching you as a thought leader. And I really have been doing what I can to kind of pull some of that to the front. And I think that as an MC, you did a wonderful job, and I can see you being involved in events like this a lot in the future. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Kyle, for giving me the opportunity, and I look forward to doing it again.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. To our audience, we truly appreciate you. For Amy Campbell, I'm Kyle Malnati, and as I love to say, we will see you around the neighborhood. Bye, everybody.